Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, Shaun in Science. I'm Shaun and I'm in Science. So I'm not a PhD student yet, but the work that I did during my masters just recently got published in Development, which is like really exciting.
Yeah, good journal.
Like,
yes.
You know,
community channel. Yes.
And I think I was doing a bit of research. You are an editor for Development.
I was.
Was.
I'm not yet. I stopped. I did 10 years and then I stopped.
Yeah. So I was second author on the paper, and I got to get a glimpse of the whole peer reviewing and trying to publish a paper.
Yeah.
And then when we first submitted, it got it didn't get rejected, but we were told to make some corrections, and then obviously we did the corrections and then we submitted. What are your thoughts on the whole process at the moment, and what would you comment on to improve that whole process, like with the peer reviewing and journal system and publishing and all that kind of stuff? And also, do you think the impact factor thing is just like, what do you think about that?
Oh my God, so you're asking some really loaded questions there. Okay, so here's a question for you. Was the final version of your paper improved compared with what you originally submitted? Or was it basically the same?
Yes, it was. It was
improved?
Yeah.
So that's the point. That's the point of peer review, and I would say I would be very confident in my experience in development that the vast majority of papers I handled were improved by the review process, and that was the objective of the majority of the reviewers. And that's what it should be about. So there is a level of stopping things getting into the literature that are clearly wrong, have some serious flaw. But then it's about what might need to be done to make this a bit better, to make these conclusions more watertight, and it's some extra pairs of eyes looking at it, and that they will see things you might not have seen, and I'd say that's true for many of the papers that we've published. That's generally the way the peer review system works. The problem is when you get to the fashion journals, the high impact journals that are so competitive to get into, and their career making or breaking paid publication in those journals, and this is all part of the problem. And so then people they no longer, or often they no longer comment very objectively on the science, and they they can go off on tangents and set quite unrealistic goals that go beyond what the current piece of work is about, and I think there is also some level of corruption in the process of people supporting their friends and not supporting the people they don't like. There's a lot of cronyism, unfortunately. So it is really a problem, and it's a problem that I think has got worse because there are now so many journals that having some hierarchy in the journals has become more and more important. And so when I was a PhD student or a postdoc, then Cell was really just another journal, and and Nature then was nice, but after that it didn't matter where you published, really. but that's no longer the case, because there's a whole swathe of journals where if you publish it will never be seen, and then there's another set of journals that can be pretty good, but funders and search committees are just not going to count them, because there's just this obsession with Cell Press or Nature journals, and so it means that the people reviewing for those journals have huge power. So people like to blame the editors, and sometimes the editors aren't very good or out of their depth, but sometimes the editors are in some of those journals I know are trying to do a good job, and they are stuck. They have two problems. They can be poorly served by the reviewers, but there's also a fundamental problem that those journals are all commercial journals, so unlike development, so that they are profit-making journals. Okay. So whatever they may say, actually for Nature or for Cell, what matters is that they publish a paper that will get some visibility on Fox News or the BBC or whatever, and attract some attention to them as being the top journal. And then that paper will get cited a lot, and the more wrong a paper is, the more it will get cited if it's published in one of those journals, and that what they want is fashionable things. That's why in the criteria, if you review for those papers, you're not asked about, the first question isn't about how good is this science, how sound is it, it's all about, is this novel, even though they tell you can't use the word novel. Well, and that's and that's typically what your rejection letter from those journals will say, is this is not novel, although you won't be told why it isn't novel usually either, or why it's not important just because it's not novel or not, So we have a kind of false criterion at that level, and the point is it's not part of our profession, but we've handed over the whole responsibility for how we're judged to this separate capitalist organisation, really, the publishing industry, and our funders and our employers haven't shown any interest in this until very recently, and even now, although they like to preach about, well, we don't really care about impact factors. Actually, that is all they care about, and it's also understandable, because if you have, you say you have 50 applicants for a job, or for a promotion, say, it's the same kind of thing, and they're coming from different areas, so you cannot possibly know, even if you've got 10 people on the panel, you can't know everything about all they do. You need some quick kind of scorecard, and that's what it is, right? And so it just quickly defaults into, well, is there a Cell or Nature paper there or not, because this person's got them, so we go with that person. That person might be very good, or they might not be. So that's just it's the way it is, and we do not have a good answer to it. My view on this, but it's easy for me to say this because I'm an old guy, but it's what I used to believe when I was very young as well, is what I used to say then is what I publish, I should expect to be able to stand by at the end of my life and say, this was the best I could do at that time. Right. Hopefully, it still turns out to be correct and true, but that should be the point, and that's what I also say to my lab. And the most important thing isn't where it's published; it's whether it's true or not. The difficulty with that now is, I used to be able to say that with some confidence, because if something was correct, it wouldn't matter where it was published. People would find it and they would cite it in the future. So, you know, it would mean like your contribution was recognised, which, you know, of course we want that, right? Otherwise, what is the point? You know? But now that doesn't happen. I mean, if you don't publish in this top level of journals, it just doesn't exist, and people won't cite it. And the citations is another thing that's completely corrupt, that people cite their friends and they don't cite the original papers anymore. And this again just completely skews these all these metrics that are supposed to be judging whether we're good or not. But you know, the other side, then what else? What's the other way you do it? You go back to kind of another type of cronyism as well. You know, okay, this person's never published anything, but they're a friend of mine, so we'll give them a job. You know, which is that also used to happen in the past. It's not. There isn't a simple solution.
You just need to try and take the corruption a bit out of it.
Well,
be more objective in that sense, because there's a lot of
and you know, try to be realistic. But I think it's always just try to keep your feet on the ground. But why, in the long term, you know, why are we doing this? And you know, it's not in general that people are bad. I mean, there are some people out there who just play the game as though it was some kind of league table that you have to get up. You know, there is a bit of a culture like that, but I still think most people are trying to do a decent job. You know, as authors or as reviewers, but we're humans, right? And people make mistakes, but they also have all kinds of biases that they don't always control. I once submitted a review to a journal in which the editor was right, asked me, do I really want to say this? And I said, actually, yes, I do, but I shouldn't have, because I basically said this is rubbish. Because I was so annoyed, and so were my two postdocs who'd looked at this paper. We were just so annoyed by the almost contemptuous way that authors were treating our review and asking them to do the proper experiment, which they just refused to do with some bullshit. But actually, it doesn't really help by letting it get too emotional. It's just stuck to the point. Anyway, you know, that's the thing. You know, people say, oh well, you can make. It would be fairer if reviewers disclose their identities. This must never happen. I completely disagree with the journals that do this now. This is deeply corrupt, because it's just people, you know, will be sycophantic. But it also means if you're a junior PI, you simply cannot afford for your career to criticise somebody's more senior in the field. You just can't. So it's bonkers, this idea that you could have open.
But some journals have, if you're submitting a paper, you can choose, or you could suggest names that review your paper, and then you can also make a list of those that shouldn't review your paper. I know you can do that. Recent submission.
You can always do that for and also for grants. Okay. There's usually a limit on the number of people you can exclude, and you're normally asked to give some reason, but there can be perfectly legitimate reasons for excluding people. There may be some, you know, ingrained personal conflict in the field. There may be a direct competitive, you know, and there are reasons why you should suggest reviewers, because the editors may not have the right kind of expertise, and you can at least give them the idea of the kind of person who would be appropriate. But I would never expect an editor to only review from the list of names that I'd suggested, and you know, sometimes you need to be careful, because they might even choose not to use any of them. I can also tell you, as an editor for development, I think now development limits the number of people you can exclude, but they didn't used to.
Mm-hmm.
And the more people are excluded, the more you worry about this paper. If they're excluding everybody in the field who knows anything, you think,
Yeah.
And then the other bizarre thing that would happen, quite often, is reviewers would be suggested, and you'd go and think, I don't know that person. You go and look at what they work on, and it has nothing at all to do with the topic matter. So it's just their friend, you know? So again, you think, well, I don't think so.
No, sorry.
Yeah, you know, it's again, you've got to be objective.
Yeah.
So again, my policy is, and I always say that to my lab, we will still nominate for reviewers the very best people in the field, as long as we don't think they have reason to believe they're going to have some angle against us. And, you know, there are one or two people as well. But if they can, you know, because it sends a message that you have real confidence in
what you produce, yeah.
Which you should do, right? If you don't have that,
Then
you shouldn't be.
why are you
shouldn't be. Exactly, but you know.
So you mentioned also earlier in the interview about how with females they would have to
Yeah.
take a break in their career. How's that been for you? Like as a father, did you ever have to take a break in your career, or was that just a? And yeah, like, and also moving on with that is sort of the work-life balance. How do you manage being, you know, a full-time scientist and also managing and being a devoteful, what is the word? Yeah.
Devoted, yeah. Yeah, but you'd have to ask my daughter about that, right? Whether she sees it that way. So, you know, in general, it is easier for men than for women. But you have to, as soon as a child comes along, things change, and you then have to work 9 to 5. You know, you've got to be home, sometimes even less than that, and you've got to organise yourself so that you work at home at the weekends. That's a lot easier now than it used to be, of course. You know, with laptops and so much stuff being done.
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
I mean, it's challenging if you're doing something like cell culture, but you just have to become very organised and quite mean with your time. But you know, somehow it is something that people do. You know, I see this all the time with women who have kids. Again, this used to be the other big prejudices. Well, you know, don't employ her if she hasn't had kids because she will have them, or don't employ her if she has got kids because she won't be here any of the time because all she cares about are her kids. And you know, in general, I've been so impressed with how efficient women become after they've had. You see almost complete transformation in how they work in the lab, and you know, there's some kind of cost comes with that, in that you lose a lot of the sort of social interactions that can make it quite pleasant to be in the lab, you know, when you're a young person. But the scientific community is, there are people at all ages and stages, and that's more diverse, I think, than it used to be. So, yeah, for me personally, it was that, just being more disciplined about working hours, and you know, most of my time with my daughter would be at the weekends. And the other thing, you know, I did if because again, you know, as a PI, if you have to be pretty visible. You have to go to meetings. You can't. So, but what I would always do would be to go as late as possible and come back as soon as I could. Again, I don't like to go to a meeting and just be one of these people who turns up for one day and goes away. That's not fair. But you know, trying to get in and out as fast as I could, consistent with being at the meeting. But again, that's easier for a man to do than a woman. I think that's actually a big challenge for women PIs and women postdocs. You know, because there's still generally quite poor provision for children at meetings, and even if it's there, it's still expensive and disruptive. And then, you know, if it's in school time, you can't anyway do anything. So that is a challenge. And you know, either way, you depend on very much on your partner. And if you're both scientists, then
is your partner a scientist?
No,
okay. Wow, that's great.
I just think that's a crazy thing to do, actually. So I avoided that. But you know.
Yeah, because that would be quite difficult to manage.
Yeah. But for some reason, people do it. So.
Oh wow. Great, I think that's really interesting because it's. I mean, when I was interviewing Dr. Eliza Laurenti. That was a bit that we spent a lot of time discussing. You know, that because she had her child when she was a PI.
Yes.
So like she would get judgment saying, "Oh, why haven't you had your kids yet?" And like when she did give birth, so like you're damned if you do,
there's
you're damned if you don't.
There's all that
It's
kind
just,
of pressure. Yeah.
So why do we do this science? Because we love it.
Because we love it, and what else is there to do, you know? I mean, that's the thing. But it kind of has to be, I think, a bit like, well, you know, there's nothing else I want to do.
Yeah.
And you know, honestly, I feel very lucky to be a scientist because it's my hobby, it's my life, and I get paid for doing it.
Yeah, because I mean, recently, like, I just have moments where I'm like, okay, if I wasn't doing science, what would I do? Like, I don't know. Like, I really like
But I think, you know, at your stage, you do have to think like that.
Yeah.
And, you know, because it is tough, and it won't get any less tough. So you've really got to want it, and you've got to feel also that you're good at it, or at least at some aspect of it, so that
that's the other thing. Sometimes I have a bit of like confidence issues.
Yeah.
Where it's not like I doubt myself, but I have a bit of like imposter syndrome as well in some regards.
Yeah.
So it's something that I'm trying to work on, where I'm actively like, okay, Sean, you might not know this now, but like with more practice and you put yourself in depth and do the reading and do the experiment and get the technique down, you become more confident in it. I think sometimes like when I start a new thing, I always feel a bit like, ooh, and then the more I do it, the more comfortable it is. But
you know, I would say that's within reason is quite a healthy thing. You know, one of the warning signs, you know, you have when you're looking at prospective PhD students or postdocs or PIs is an overconfidence. You know, people do need to have some level of confidence, but you also have to be self-aware and self-critical, and I think and many of us go through times thinking, well, you know, am I really good enough for this? But you know, I think that's just a normal part of being a critical or thoughtful, you know, individual. And you know, sometimes it's also, so one of the things that it can be a bit tough in science is we're not always very good at recognizing or telling people when they've done something well. We're quite good at telling them when they haven't done it well, but not always at telling them when. And I think that's at all levels, and then somehow praise can get unduly lavished on some particular individual, and somebody else who's done an equally good job might get ignored. I think we're not very very good at that, and that can lead, I think, perhaps to some of this imposter syndrome type of feelings, because you always having to fall back on your own resources. Yeah. So you know, it was very important in my earlier career as a young, I guess as a postdoc, as a young PI, and you know, then that a couple of people that I respected in the field told me that what I was doing was important and good, and you know, because nobody else did. No, basically I was fighting with everyone else in the field, but you know, and you do need that. Yeah.
Okay, that was really quite nice to hear, actually, because as the whole process of me like applying PhDs to try and get to the next step. Yeah. It's really, I think when I was applying for this round, again, it was silly for me to just apply, because it was that, I think it was also that confidence as well, because I'm like, okay, I know I want to do my PhD in Cambridge, and not just for the name, but especially here, because I've been here for over a year, I've seen the culture, I want to work out, I'm interested in the field that I'm doing, like stem cell in research in general, but also the opportunities obviously feed into different, with the rotations. So I did a bit of soul search, and then obviously I just did apply to this one. And when I was like speaking with Brian about like feedback on the paper interview, I think that was the thing that was like not my downfall, but that was the thing where I could have been more confident when we were discussing the paper. Like, when I was reading the paper, I was really critical of it, but when it came to discussion, I didn't really drive that discussion. I didn't feel like, okay, no, I want to make my views clear. So I think that's what I'm going to use this year to obviously develop. And for me, that going through this experience has actually boosted my confidence in the ironic way, because the fact that I was able to like get through the shortlisting and get through to interviews showed that at least on paper and, you know, to an extent when I interact with people, I have the fundamental
absolutely.
Boxes,
and
so.
You know, so maybe Brian didn't tell you this, but I think, you know, one of the things that is very obvious in these PhD student interviews is that somebody who it's their first interview, they got no chance. No chance at all. Really, it's just so. So you know.
Okay, I don't know.
Because you learn so much, right?
And it's been such a learning curve. There's so many things that I want to use this year to just really. Yeah.
But you should look somewhere else though, and not just Cambridge.
Cool. All right, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this interview. It's been very, very informative, and yeah, this is like more or less the last broadcast of Austin, because he's unfortunately leaving us. I don't know what we did. Did we hurt you, Austin?
No.
But he's going to bless the people of Exeter in a few months, and we're supporting you, and we hope you go do more great science in Exeter as well. Thanks again for coming on the channel, and have a lovely time over there. I always find it so awkward ending the videos. Bye.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Austin. We've